Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dale Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, wrapping up spring practice with an open spring practice on Saturday afternoon, which, allowing us to get a lot of information about this team heading into fall camp. But I think just as importantly, heading into that spring transfer portal window where Brian Kelly was vocal that if there is an opportunity to help this roster going into 2025, this LSU team is going to pursue that. And from what we saw in the winter, I would not be surprised if Brian Kelly and LSU make some waves over the next couple of weeks. Now, what positions does it sound like LSU needs to address in the portal? That's the conversation I want to get into, along with some new names that are going to provide so much value to this football team in 2025, specifically on the defense. Still, I'll just start with a hot take. This defense, I think, has the chance to be really freaking good in 2025. It starts with the new names at the edge rusher position. Jack Pyburn sounds like he's one of the best football players on this defense. You're getting what you expected from Patrick Payton. Jamari Butler, a very solid addition. I'm going to throw in Gabriel Relaford going into year two. He sounds like a monster. But then in the back end, Monster Delane was a hit. Jakeem Jackson was a hit. Tamarcus Cooley was a hit. DJ Pickett's going to play as a freshman. The new faces that are getting injected into this program on defense, they are upgrades. They are making this team better. That's to go along with, Coach Blake Baker going into year two calling this defense. You always see a bump from year two defensive coordinators. When you have the personnel right, when you have the coaching staff right, that's when you get elite units. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to say LSU is going to be elite in 2025. This is going to be one of the better LSU defenses that we've seen in a very long time, especially since Brian Kelly's been there. Want to get into some more names now before we do, and as always, to the LSU fans, appreciate you guys. It's been a team we've talked about a lot, and it's been really fun to talk about, really going back to that winter transfer portal window. A lot of the LSU fans have shown a ton of support and been rocking with the boys for a while. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's open up with the pros. What we are hearing out of spring that fires us up, and then we'll get into the conversation of, hey, where are the last remaining portions of this team that maybe need to be addressed in the transfer portal window. To you, what fires you up the most about this LSU football team going into 2025?
Probably the fact that this pass rush sounds like it's not going to be a huge drop off, if any, from last year. That was the one thing that worked. That and Whit Weeks. Those were the two things on that defense that you can kind of count on. The edge rushers, Whit Weeks, and it sounds like, again, Jack Pyburn and Jamari Butler, I would have had my questions about, frankly, because you didn't really get to see them rush off the edge a whole lot at their previous spots, especially for Pyburn. They used them more on first and second down, kind of be a run defender. I mean, that's a huge reason why he's at LSU in the first place. But, man, if he can translate what he does in the run game where we know he's really good and also be a really good effective pass rusher on the edge, I think that's probably the thing about the spring that's probably been most encouraging.
I think we got our answer to why Jack Pyburn hit the transfer portal. There were some questions. Hey, why? He played pretty good for Florida. Why is he in the portal? Wanted more opportunity to rush the passer. He thinks he's good at it. Well, it sounds like he's pretty damn good at it coming out of spring practice. Dill, it sounds like, one, you're getting the best out of Patrick Payton. Look, if you get the best out of this kid, he's going to be an all-conference edge rusher. It's just about, hey, do you get the best out of him? Jack Pyburn, like you said, hit the pass rush juice he's bringing is really exciting. And then Gabriel Relaford, a name that maybe people won't talk about as much because he's not part of that crop of new toys. He sounds like he's taking a monster step going into year two. Those four edge rushers, it's a deep unit. It sounds like a unit that's dominating. They're good against the run and getting after the pass. That's a very good recipe if you're LSU going into 2025. Linebacker room, I think we are both confident, is going to be very good, especially as Perkins works his way back in. Dill, the secondary also sounds like a unit that is significantly improved. And the question mark we've been kind of harping on all spring practices, last year Coach Baker did not have the pieces. It was a unit that didn't have much talent, but it also didn't have a ton of depth. You were forced to play some players not only who probably weren't quite ready and were still young and developing, but also guys just out of position. Javion Toviano had no business playing a boundary cornerback spot in the SEC, at least in my opinion. You kind of had to play him there because you just did not have that many bodies. If you were a healthy body as a defensive back, you were probably playing. all of a sudden you're looking at it and say, all right, Mansour Lane, we know what he is. Jakeem Jackson is the name that surprises me the most, where you looked at him coming from Florida. You love the athletic profile. You love the physical parts about his game. It's just, are you going to stay healthy and put it together? Well, it sounds like he has, along with DJ Pickett being the ready player that we thought he was. The depth and talent getting better for LSU in the secondary, specifically at the cornerback spot, is going to be so big for Coach Baker going into year 2.
And the cornerback spot looks loaded, and that's what I wonder how they're going to use him. Like PJ Woodland, like I feel like he has to play. Like he
Play
has
a
to
role at least, yeah.
points. And again, I know they kind of want to use Harold Perkins at that star spot, but like I imagine there's games where you want more of a true nickel in that football game. PJ Woodland, again, doesn't have prototypical size, maybe that boundary cornerbacks are kind of expected to have. Not that it seems like it's held him back particularly much, but man, the way he plays, the way he can move, the way he can mirror guys, I mean, screams that he can be an elite nickel. So I wonder like what they're going to do with him, because again, you can't just have him sit in the bench behind really good boundary corners.
But I think you just highlighted the reason to be optimistic about this defense. Like the questions we had last year about this defense were like, do you have a good enough players to have 11 good players in the football field? Yeah. Now the question is, we have plenty more than 11 good football players. Now the question is, how do we get them on the field in their best spots to kind of put together our best defense, which is an infinitely better problem to have coming out of spring practice, especially when you have a defensive coordinator that I think is great at his job. Like, I think there's a reason Brian Kelly shelled it out last year for Blake Baker. He's got the talent. He's got the pieces. What's stopping this defense going into 2025, which maybe gets us into the last question mark on defense, and that is potential portal additions. Maybe at safety, although I feel like you feel pretty good about that. It's the defensive line, the middle of the defensive line, right? It's been a quiet position. You bring in Kyle Williams. Shout out Bills Mafia. I feel like LSU's in a good spot because it's not like, last year there were so many potential holes in this defense. It was like it's hard to fill up all the holes or like kind of plug all the holes in the portal. Now it's one position that you really need to address. And that's probably what fires me up the most about LSU going into this portal window.
You see, I think if there's a starting level safety come available, it wouldn't surprise me if LSU made a run. And then if there's starting level, like if there's a Dominic Williams in the portal this year, I'd be very surprised if LSU was not aggressive, not pursuing, because again, you certainly like Ahmad Bro and Dominic McKinley, what they did last year, their projection, their hopefully development. But you still certainly have your questions about what Sean Washington and Jacoby and Guillory can be at the high end, if you will, and what they can be at in terms of difference makers. So again, there's two positions I still think, like if you
I'd push back on safety. I think they probably feel better I'm sitting here in my basement in Rochester, New York, saying LSU's good at safety. Like Brian Kelly and Coach Baker probably know more than me. But from what I've heard, I feel like you're kind of excited about getting guys back in the positions they should be playing. I know Tamarcus Cooley's a good football player. I liked what I saw from Deshaun Spears last year. I think it's like, hey, roll out the red carpet and really put an emphasis on grabbing one or two difference makers along the line of scrimmage. Because if there's one position that I think could hold this team back, it's there. Because still, from what I'm hearing from these edge rushers, I want to be able to stop the run as good as I can. I want to be able to set up those third and longs where I can ask Patrick Payton, Gabriel Relaford, or Jack Piper to pin the ears back and get after it. My only problem is, hey, there might be teams that can run the football if we're not good enough on the inside of the defensive line. All right. The second question you have coming out of what you heard from the open practice is the offensive line. It's kind of that classic spring game double-edged sword where it's like, oh, the edge rushers are having a day. Love it. Well, what does that mean for our starting offensive line? I'm not saying it's not a concern. Anytime you have to replace the amount of talent and just the amount of raw experience, it's probably a concern for most LSU fans. There's two things that mitigate the concern for me, really three things. Number one is that you've heard good things from this unit throughout spring practice. Might have had a bad spring practice that was open to the fans and the media, but you've heard good things from that unit. Number two, they're clearly mixing and matching here. It's like, it sounds like it's musical chairs up front. I mean, you got Josh Thompson getting reps at tackle. He ain't a tackle. We know, we've seen him play tackle at Northwestern. He ain't a tackle. I think they're maybe doing that one to figure out your best five. Also, probably trying to keep some of this depth out of the portal because at the end of the day, there are some guys on this LSU team that would probably start on some other teams across the country that are going to be in the two deep. Rotating guys and continuing that competition probably helps to keep your depth. And then, Dill, I think lastly, I am confident with the development and talent that they've accumulated. They've recruited this position well. You look up and down this offensive line, it's a lot of blue chip talent. They've done a great job developing their offensive line. And so there's kind of that baseline security that I feel like this unit should be solid, but I can understand some of the maybe concerns that you might have with this unit.
Yeah, and there will be some natural ones, especially at tackle. Like, I think on the
Yeah.
inside, it sounds like it's developed the way I think most of us like. Again, you look, DJ Chester, like, I know he took some heat last year, but he was a young player. You
Sounds
certainly
like he had a
saw
good spring.
sounds like he's playing well.
Yeah.
Braylon Moore, obviously very good. Paul
Bra-
Mubangi played a ton. Cohen Eccles played a fair or looked really
Look,
good.
can I add one more thing? Sorry to cut you off. I think Braylon Moore is going to start at center, and I think DJ Chester is going to play guard. Dill, we've watched too much of Braylon Moore play really good football for him not to be a part of this starting five, and I think he can only play center. Like DJ Chester can play guard, can play center. I think Braylon Moore has to be a center. So
And he probably is one of your best five because he
I
was
think so
really
too.
good for Virginia Tech, I should say.
Hearing really good things about Cohen Eccles too, though. Like, and that, I guess that's what I mean. Like, this is kind of proving my point, especially on the inside. Like,
Yeah, but that is I think we kind of thought that about the inside. I still think like this spring has probably generated some level of questions at the tackle spot. Because
yes, agreed.
again, like I look on paper, I wouldn't have necessarily thought the LSU defensive end room was like one of the best in the conference, if you will. Like, again, there's certainly some good players, but
Yeah.
do I think it's like what Texas is? I don't know about that. I mean, Texas has some guys who I think are legit first rounders. LSU's guys are going to have to prove it this year. Like Pyburn's going to need to prove it.
Yeah.
Obviously, same with the Florida State.
Pat Payton.
Like those guys, we haven't seen dominant football necessarily, so that probably is the inherent question: is that tackle spot again? Weston Davis, Kyrie Adams, talented players, but they are very young, and we haven't really seen them.
Yeah, and it's also probably the unit where you don't have as much depth, right? Like on the inside of the like, if you told me Solomon Thomas was maybe pushing for, like, I would be okay. Solomon Thomas, day one ready guy. Sounds like he's not quite ready yet for LSU, but that tackle, there's maybe some question marks about who else do we have competing for that spot. Outside of that, like, Dill, if this offensive line is solid, you have the quarterback, you have the pass catchers. I think you're going to have the running back room. You've heard great things from Harlan Berry, who I think is going to play a role in 2025. We know what Caden Durham can do. It's really about this LSU offensive line coming together, and it's probably going to be the biggest storyline to monitor in fall camp. Look, if you get a good offensive line from LSU in 2025, this offense is going to put up a lot of points. And I think this defense is going to be a damn good unit. It's one of the more complete teams in college football. You have some lingering questions, but you don't have the questions that we're asking for some of these other programs. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. To the LSU fans, y'all, please let it fly in the comment section in terms of positions you would like to see LSU pursue, because that's going to, we're going to talk a lot about some names that have entered the portal specifically for this LSU team. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.